So welcome to the DPM podcast, where we go beyond theory to give expert PM advice for managing better digital projects. And thanks for tuning in. I'm Ben Aston, the founder of the Digital Project Manager. And today, for the first time ever, I have a co-host, and her name is Robin.
Hey guys, happy to be here.
So in this podcast, we're going to do something a little bit different. We've not done this before, but we're going to take some time to talk about what's going on in our DPM tribe. So keep listening if you want to be challenged on being a better DPM this year. If you want to hear some incredible insights on this month's articles, and listen up to hear our take on all the big questions and discussions and debates that have been going on this month in the Slack team. This podcast is brought to you by Clarizen. They're the leader in enterprise project and portfolio management. Visit clarizen.com to learn more. So I'm going to hand over to Robin. Take it away.
Hey, everybody. So I'm really excited to be doing this podcast. I feel like it's a really great opportunity for those of us in the DPM field to kind of reflect and talk about the content that we're publishing, and also talk through some of the harder things that happen in our careers. But Ben and I were talking, and we were like, you know what would be cool is if we sort of had a theme for every one of these podcasts, right? So instead of just being like, okay, we looked at some stuff and talked about some things, maybe we can all have like a centralized focus to move forward on. And so for this podcast, it's 2019, you guys, it's a new year. And I kind of want to get cheesy about it and kind of like focus in a little bit about what are we doing personally and professionally as DPMs, right? So, right now it's kind of the end of January, but people are doing Whole30, they're on fad diets, they're going to the gym, they're trying to do all these different things to change up their life. And I have never been a person that participates in that, but professionally, I'm trying to kind of lean in and figure out what are some goals I can be doing for myself to grow and kind of think beyond that. So I want to encourage all of you guys to kind of lean into that as well, get vulnerable, get kind of weird about it. And I think some of the topics we're going to be talking about today really will inspire you to help craft some goals and do that, right? So, thinking about that again, it's like we all set KPIs for clients, and we're really big advocates of that. So I'm going to champion you and cheerlead you to set your own key performance indicators for success in 2019.
And what are those for you then, Robin?
I don't know. So that's what I mean about being vulnerable. Like, I realize I need to do this exercise, and it's something I feel like I've done more in the earlier stages of my career. And so now we're just kind of coasting. So I'm totally down to be transparent about my goals with all of you, and we can kind of go through this process together. But Ben, I don't know, have you ever set goals?
Do you know, I think I tend to be reluctant to set goals because I know that I'm not very good at sticking to them. There's one thing that I probably suffer with, it's a lack of discipline in executing. So for me, even the idea of these, everyone seems to be doing the 30-day challenges at the moment. And for me, that seems like an incredibly long time. But I think for me, when I'm thinking about, though, in terms of managing projects, the kind of things that I know that are really important and that really make a difference and move the needle on the projects, for me, are about the managing and controlling side of things. And it might be as simple as, hey, every week I'm going to make sure that when I update my status report, that I actually update the entire status report. I think there can be this tendency where we think, do you know what? I'm just going to update the top bit and hope that, like, the risk section at the bottom, don't worry about that. I haven't got time for that. But maybe a goal could be for your projects thinking, okay, every week I'm going to update the entire status report and being disciplined. And I think for me, that's one of probably the areas that I need to grow in is, am I being disciplined? Am I kind of setting the goal in the first place, but then being disciplined and actually making sure that I stick to it to achieve it?
I love that. Yeah. I would say one of the things I'm trying to work on holistically is kind of figuring out how to better deliver feedback and also accept feedback. So right now I'm reading this book called Thank You for the Feedback. And if you know me personally, like I've been speaking mounds of it to everybody, but it's essentially that you can have different needs of feedback in different sections of your life, right? So there's appreciation, there's evaluation, and there's coaching. And I've realized I have a ton of opportunity for improvement in both soliciting the kind of feedback I need and also giving my team members and even clients the kind of feedback that is relevant and useful for them. So I think that's something I'm going to keep rolling forward, and hopefully we'll see that pan out in our goals.
Good stuff. So yeah, I think that's a really good idea though. I think at the beginning of the year is such a great time to be thinking about, okay, well, where do I want to be at the end of the year? And then think about, okay, well, what are the things that are stopping me from getting to that place that I want to be? And I think you're right though, in terms of our career development, sometimes I think maybe when we're kind of even in that more senior kind of part of our career, we can think, hey, well, I'm not a junior PM or a PM anymore. Hey, I made it to senior. So what have I got to work on? But I think there's always things that we can think about, where do I want to go? Where do I want this to lead to? And that kind of brings me on to talk about actually one of the pieces of content that we published this year. If you haven't checked it out yet, go and take a look. It's called Fueling Your Career. And we made this workbook to really help us think through this process. And it's a 3-part workbook. And the first bit is all about owning your success, and then creating your roadmap to get there. And then we give a whole load of resources to help you facilitate upskilling yourself and thinking about the kind of things that you need to do to hit your goals. So if you haven't checked that out yet, go and check it out. Robin, it sounds like you need to you need to download that.
Guilty, yeah.
But we have actually published a whole load of content this month, at the beginning of the year, that if you haven't checked out yet, I really encourage you to do so. We've done another couple of podcasts. If you haven't listened to them, go and check them out. I did one with Suze Hayworth on starting projects, right? How to start projects in such a way that they end the way that you intended them to. And also did a podcast with Tucker called Because I'm Worth It. And it wasn't about makeup. It was about why it is that you can't afford to be without project management. So if either of those articles sound interesting, check those out. And then we also did on this theme about kind of thinking about, where do we go with our careers? What are we doing? What are our goals for the year? One of the posts we published just recently was by Diane Gillespie, and that was all about what to do when you hate your job. And what she talks about is working out why, and then kind of how to evaluate the options. Dennis published a post on building high performance teams. That could be another interesting thing. Like if you're thinking, hey, well, I'm sorted, I'm okay as a person. I'm thinking about, well, how we can make our teams work better. And Robin, I like what you're talking about with coaching. How can we give feedback to make our teams perform better? It might not just, our goals don't just have to be about ourselves. And then we also did a webinar, I don't know if anyone calls it, on emotional intelligence. We talked about how it impacts that PM role and how to develop more emotional intelligence in the ways that we manage projects. We also published a post on how to become a project manager, and I'd love to hear, Robin, your story on how you became a project manager. I think in the post, Suze talks about her journey and what she went through. But I think it's always interesting for people who are thinking, oh, I want to be a project manager, but how do I do it? What was that kind of like aha moment for you when you're like, this is it, I'm actually going to be a project manager?
Yeah. So it's super funny too, because it's like, I don't think I ever was in college and knew that that was even a career path, right? You always think you're going to be a copywriter, or, I don't know, a strategist or something. But I remember I was working kind of in the account side at a traditional agency, and I was coordinating with somebody, a vendor, a website vendor, and they had the role of a producer. Her name was Amanda. And I just remember being like, I want this girl's job, going back and forth over the phone. And so that was it. I was sold. So I think a lot of us fall into that career path, but it's really important to examine, after we're in that spot, do we want to remain there? Is this fulfilling our needs? And then how do we curate sort of the best life experience, knowing that we work the majority of our lives?
Yeah. I think for me, that moment, I was in an above the line ad agency, so working on TV, radio and press. And it was cool because it was really sexy, but it was kind of around the time that the internet started becoming more mainstream in terms of budgets were beginning to focus and shift more and more to digital. So I was like, okay, I can do this above the line advertising thing, and it's cool. I go on shoots and it's fun, it's sexy. But in the meantime, since I was like 13 or 14, I'd been making websites and I understood the digital world and actually realized that I had a lot of value that I could add to projects simply because I understood how they worked in a way that other people didn't. And so for me, that was the moment when I was like, hey, I could be a kind of mediocre account person and I could kind of keep on going on doing account management, or I can actually apply some of my passion and some of my skills and background that I have in making stuff for the web. And I could be an excellent producer or digital project manager. So that was kind of the moment for me when I was like, hey, this is actually what I'm doing in my spare time anyway. So this seemed like a fun thing. And I'm glad I did. Here I am today, 15 years later. So one of the things that we published this month as well, and I'm curious to kind of get your perspective, we published a post on the trends transforming the PM role. And we talked about automation and artificial intelligence, method melding, the gig economy, a whole load of different things. But I'm curious for you, Robin, like what if any of those trends do you see being real for you in 2019? Is there anything that's like particularly struck you that's kind of changed or shifted?
Well, definitely soft skills are always important, no matter the year, no matter what's happening. I am a big fan of those. But I think, for me, I see definitely a greater focus on data. Like I see a lot of clients asking me to interpret analytics again, which is something I haven't done for years, and kind of wanting to say, do I go brush up and get certified again? Or like, I have to figure this out. So definitely data is more present than ever, and it's something I can definitely grow in.
Nice. Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm really seeing in terms of project management tools is this shift towards, and I think we're going to see it more and more, is the more automation and increasing amounts of artificial intelligence in terms of doing things like handling the resources. And I think we're going to see this shift towards, and we talk about this in the post, but the role of project management and the kind of importance of those soft skills is really, really critical. And I think as tools and things become even more important, as they become more important because they're doing cleverer things, then our role will shift even further as we like to this soft skill part of it. And I think it's going to, over the next year or so, we're going to see tools that are more intelligent, that they're doing more things for us, so that we don't need to worry so much about doing things like status reports, because the machine is going to do them for us. We don't have to worry so much about resource scheduling because that's all kind of like mapped out for us. I think that's the way that the tools are heading, and so they're going to become more important, and it also is always just going to change what we do as part of that.
Yeah, Ben, I really like where you're going with that automation. And I think for PMs, we can kind of evolve more into a strategic role then on our projects versus just being the person that has to like copy and paste and status update. So yeah. I like that trend. I hope it goes further than we think.
Definitely. So next up, I want to talk about what you are all talking about, the word on the DPM street. And if you're not part of our Slack team, you should come and join our Slack team. Go to the digitalprojectmanager.com and go to the resources section. And there you will find, if you join our Slack team, we've got more than 2,000 people who are keyboard warriors in a nice way, helping each other out with whatever questions people have got. And we actually launched some new channels this month. Someone said, hey, can you create an agile channel? So we did that. We've got some specific tools as well. There's a tool for Reich, there's a tool channel for Asana. So if you want to check those out, or if you're interested in those tools, have a look. And if you want any new channels on Slack, let me know. But yeah, what we wanted to spend some time doing today is discussing some of the discussions that have been going on in Slack and adding our perspective and point of view on it. And I want to start with, there wasn't much discussion around it, but I think if you haven't watched it yet, Fyre, the greatest party that never happened, Robin and I were just talking about this beforehand. If you haven't watched it yet, you can watch it on Hulu or Netflix, I think. 2 different documentaries. But I watched the Netflix one, and it was the most incredible story of, it seemed like a project with no project management. And if you ever wanted to make the case for why you need project management, I think just telling them to watch Fyre would be a good one. But what was your take on it, Robin?
Yeah, I watched both the Netflix and the Hulu ones because, you know, it's very indulgent. For me, it was fascinating to see sort of like this really intelligent marketing strategy that was put into place, right, to attract people to the island. And they had all this capital, and the messaging was fabulous, and they definitely got these like rich millennials on board, right? And then it all fell apart. But something Ben and I were kind of offlining is that, you know, while that guy, Billy, whatever his name is a terrible psychopath, I felt like his team that supported him didn't really say, hey, this is messed up early enough, or raise enough risks early enough. And they kind of just followed along. And so for me as a DPM, I was just like really uncomfortable with hearing all these people that were like close in his squad be so mad about it afterwards, when it didn't seem like that they tried to mitigate risk with everybody. So everybody's guilty.
Yeah. And it seemed like that people were saying, yeah, I tried telling him that it wasn't going to work, and he said,
too bad.
I've got to figure out a way to make it work. And that was kind of it. And so the guy was like, and so I was like, okay, well, I guess I told him. When I'm like, at that point, that would be the point where it's like, okay, ultimatum, and there's a consequence to this. If you proceed down this path, then this is going to happen, and it means that I am no longer part of this. Like they had that choice. So I thought that was some fascinating lessons there, I think, on project management.
Yeah, it made me think of clients a lot too, right, Ben? Because it's like a lot of times, you know, your clients come to you with unrealistic demands, and for some reason, Fyre Festival just kept going on and going on and going on, and nobody cut the cord on them, which was really fantastic. When I feel like a lot of times we're like, all right, we're not going to move forward in this effort anymore. So to me, it was almost a little bit inspiring that even the greatest hot messes can keep going, even if the end result isn't great. But
yeah, and it's also part of the reason it kept on going as well is because they kept on finding a little bit more cash. If they'd somehow run out of money, and when they did run out of money, obviously there's probably thousands of people who haven't been paid, which is terrible. But yeah, if you keep on, you know, giving it just enough fuel to keep going another few yards, then the situation just gets worse and worse. Like had they cancelled the project 6 months earlier, you know, a few people would have been annoyed, but at least thousands of people would have been saved from the carnage that followed. But next I want to talk about, and this kind of maybe segues through documentation. And someone in the Slack channel talked about, they said, hey, I've just had a client ask about functionality that we all agreed was not going to be in the final product. Turns out I didn't document the crucial decision when it was made. We're close to our expected launch date, and I can't prove to the client that she approved this. Have you ever experienced or witnessed this, and what did you do? Robin, have you ever experienced this, and what did you do?
No, never. I'm perfect. Yeah, this happens, and it still happens to me today. And I think that, you know, I saw a lot of really great responses in the Slack channel about how to handle that. But in the end, it's really a learning experience, and you kind of just need to like humble up and kind of eat it. I think a lot of times I've worked with my account managers or potentially my team lead, and I'll say, hey, maybe we split the difference on this and we'll write off this portion, and then we'll kind of go back to the client and say, oh, this took longer and this is why. But don't say you're sorry. Use the other language for that, right? Like, oh, this is really frustrating. Here's what happened. Like, you don't have to pity party yourself.
I think one of the things, I think ultimately when you're in that decision, when it's already happened, when you've hit the point that the client has said, hold on, where's this widget that we were going to do? Like, it's really important. It was always going to be there. And you're like, what are you even talking about? Like, at that point, it's too late to go back to, if you haven't written it down, you haven't written it down. You just have to deal with the situation. And I like what you're saying, Robin. Talk about splitting the difference. Although I actually just bought a book on negotiation, which is never split the difference. But yeah, talking about sharing the burden of that if you're interested in keeping the relationship. But sometimes if this is happening on your projects and you're like, hey, the client always seems to imagine things right at the last minute or add things to the scope and it was never included. I think you have to evaluate whether or not that's a good client to have in the first place. If they're the ones kind of person who, they're always just pushing and there's no reciprocal exchange, like, okay, yeah, we'll pay you money for the extra work that we're asking you to do, then maybe they're not worth having at all. But I think things to protect yourself, definitely in that first instance, are things like a decision log and a risk ledger and documenting those issues, those dependencies as you go through the project. And, asking the client every week, hey, these are the kind of assumptions that we've got, the risks, assumptions, issues, dependencies. Are we missing anything here? And that is why the status report and the statement of work is so important in the first place. Another interesting discussion that came up was about difficult developers. And there was someone talking about how there was a developer in their team who didn't want to test their code. What was your take on that?
Yeah, I've been there, and it's like I can almost like see myself in this situation. I don't know why I was holding a piece of paper, but I was. But yeah, I remember a few years ago, and I had this developer who was like, well, I can't test it because I made it. And I was like, that does not make any sense. And I had not encountered that before. I believe that absolutely, you can't proofread your own paper as well as somebody else with a fresh set of eyes would be able to, but you should at least do your due diligence to smoke test it, right? You should do a pass before you pass it off because that's how you ensure quality work. And so I think, I saw a lot of really great answers come from the clients, or from the Slack channel, but essentially it's like, yeah, that person is wrong. And I don't know what sort of culture you're stepping into. I think there's a lot of different situations out there where maybe they were allowed to not smoke test it, but this is an opportunity for you to be able to be a change agent and kind of re-steer that. And then in the end, your client's going to get better work.
Yeah. And I think, there's a lot to be said for things like test-driven development. And that is, you start with the test case and you know that you've done it when you can, when you can run that test and you run that test successfully. That's like a type of development approach. And so I think that's why things like when we write the user stories, defining like the acceptance criteria, defining the definition of done. And we need to set that up right at the beginning of the project and kind of align with our developers on, hey, this is how, when I'm going to brief you with something, there's going to have these acceptance criteria that defines how it's going to work and what done looks like. And if we can get alignment on that, then it's not so much about them QAing their own work, but just finishing it. And I think what Robin and I are both agreeing on is, hey, your work's got to work. Otherwise, you can't say it's complete. So that's a fun challenge to deal with when you've got developers doing that kind of thing. Another interesting discussion that came up that I wanted to cover off was all about morale boosting. And someone saying, hey, our team's gone through a lot of changes. They can tell that morale is low. What are some ideas to boost morale, to build the team culture? And the kind of the tricky thing in there is that they're a remote team or remote PM. So how you kind of function and do that in that scenario. And there's some great stuff that came up. But Robin, you are a remote PM. You know what that's like. What would you suggest?
Yeah, I am working in the remote space still, right? After 19 months. I think some things that worked really well for me is you have to really feel out the different personalities in your team, right? So if your workplace doesn't have a budget for you guys all to get together and have like a meetup once a year, because that's the ideal, right? Or more times or whatever. What really works for me is that we have like a collective TV show we watch, right? That's kind of fun. Or we have inside jokes made out of Giphies. Or sometimes I've even just done like a Friday happy hour where you don't have to drink, but we just kind of show up, shoot the crap, and just get to know each other. And that's really done a lot. I mean, I think I would really strongly advise you don't create the kind of culture that just, talks about the poor morale, but instead you need to kind of be the person that lifts other people up, and kind of you can be that glue to reshape it, right? Don't be Debbie Downer. You don't have to like be crazy cheerleader, but just provide, some sort of coordination for your team to help other people feel safe and good.
Yeah, I think I love what you're saying about being a cheerleader. And I think part of that cheerleading is giving people, creating achievable goals. Because I think when the team is down, we want to kind of begin to get some momentum. And I think when it can kind of feel like, hey, it just seems to all be going wrong, if you can get some quick wins and be like, okay, well, let's set ourselves some goals. Let's achieve those goals and make sure that they're very achievable. And then you can celebrate them and then get this sense of like, hey, we're winning. We've got some movement here. We're going places. And I think that can be being the cheerleader throughout that process and being the one that's making a big deal about things that probably really aren't a big deal or people should be doing anyway, just as a routine part of their job. But making people feel like they're winning, I think, is massively important in kind of boosting morale and getting momentum. But kind of talking about morale, I think one of the things that I've kind of had to deal with over the last little while is this question around billability. And it came up in the Slack channel. There's a kind of discussion around it. And the question was all about, does your firm set agency-wide billable hours goals? And it's been different for me in different agencies I've been to. Most recently, it was, hey, there's an 80% billability. But I've been in agencies where it's been as high as 90%. And in the discussion, there are people who are talking about percentages and also cost targets versus their how much they cost the company versus how much revenue they've generated. But what's been your experience of that? Because it's something that really seems to get some people down, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a metric, right? It's how you're graded. It's that evaluation of the feedback I mentioned earlier. So, I've been in roles where it's, 75% of your time has to be billable to clients. And then the other 15% can be like admin and overhead and sort of fun things or kind of group meetings. But I've also had in the past where I haven't had to do timesheets, right? And just kind of how you spent your time is how you spent your time as you were resourced. So it depends, I guess, on where you live. I don't think there's a sweet spot in terms of DPM, but I'd say anywhere from like 20 to 15% is normal. Like asking your group to be 90% billable, you're going to get people really high turnover.
Yeah, and I think it also depends. I think what's difficult about this as well is that there are variables like the clients that you have and then the other kind of roles on your team. For example, if you're a project manager who's also account management focused, part of your role is going to be building the business, developing those client relationships. And you're not going to be able to build the client for that. You're not going to be able to build them for the time that you should be spending on being more strategic in understanding the client's business and where their business is heading and going. And that has to be paid for somehow. So I think it depends on the roles, the clients, and it's really hard just to give a blanket metric or force people into that as an agency. But I do know it's useful in terms of being able to look across the agency. And if you've got some people who are really low on billability, you need to ask why that is. I want to just, while we're finishing off discussing what's been going on in Slack, and there's been so much Slack discussion this month, which has been awesome. But there was one question about project management software, and actually free project management software. There was someone who was trying to find a free project management tool that would allow them to create projects, schedules, tasks, Gantt charts, time tracking, expense management, and calendars. And I think that is a big ask for some free project management software. And I think my kind of perspective on the project management software is that there are not many, if any, really good free project management software tools out there. And I think a lot of the tools, what they'll do is they'll give you a free trial, or they'll have a really low plan, which is like, hey, you can have one project or 3 Gantt charts and 5 megabytes of storage or something. But I would just say, don't be lured in by the free bit of it. Like, if you want a proper project management tool, you're going to have to pay for it. That's just the reality, and it's worth paying for one that really meets your requirements. But Robin, what tools are you using at the moment that you love and hate?
Yeah. I'm a firm believer there is no perfect tool, right? We are always in search of something that can do everything, and I'll never find it, but I'm still going to keep searching for it. I think some of my favorite tools have been Flow. I love Basecamp. I love Smartsheet for timelines. But right now I'm using Teamwork, and I've come to love it. I think the hardest thing is that if you do introduce a new project management tool to your workplace, is that everybody else has to like it too. Everybody else will have opinions. And so you just really want to make sure that you collect some pieces of thought from people beyond PMs when you introduce that.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned Teamwork, which is interesting. That is one of the few tools that has a free plan that I think allows, like, for teams smaller than 5 or something, I think it's free. And it's an okay tool. But if you're looking for tools, go to thedigitalprojectmanager.com, click on our tools, and we've got loads of listings of different types of tools. It might be that you want a tool just for, a marketing project management software solution and an end-to-end solution, or it could be that you're just picking out different things like, hey, I just need a Gantt chart tool, and so, hey, use Instagantt or Smartsheet or whatever it might be. So trying to find a tool that does everything for free, I think, is a long shot, but you might be able to get some free bits here and there if you kind of go for the lots of different tools approach. So we're going to end things there, but Robin, I know you want to leave us with a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that if anybody out there wants to join me in doing the workbook, let's connect. Let's do it together. Let's kind of hold ourselves accountable and kind of figure out what we want to be doing next year. Well, through this year into next year, right?
2019.
Instead of setting goals for our clients and other people, like, let's think about ourselves for a minute and do some self-care professionally. So let's do it.
Good stuff. Well, Robin, thanks so much. And thanks for joining us. It's been great having you with us today.
Yeah, it's been fun.
So if you'd like to be part of the discussion, I hope we've given you a bit of a taster of the discussion that's going on in Slack. So join us, go to thedigitalprojectmanager.com and click on the resources section, and you can join the tribe and join in the lots of discussions that we're having. You'll find all kinds of helpful advice there. And I'd love to know what you think about our new format for this video podcast. Do you like what you heard today? Shall we carry on? Please subscribe and take a couple of minutes just to leave your feedback. An honest review would be helpful, whether that's on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever it is. Just drop us an email. We'd love to know what you think, and that'll help us tailor the show for future. But until next time, thanks for watching.